Good morning and welcome to BlueVolt's webinar hosted by ASA. We're really excited that you're here this morning to join us for a journey down the learning canvas and how that fits within your business. I'm really excited today because we have our Director of Learning Strategy on the line, Jeannie Sullivan, who will be walking you through the learning canvas and how that can be valuable to your business. Just a little logistical things. If you have any questions while we're going along, feel free to put them in the chat box. You're welcome to shoot me a quick note saying saying hi so that we know that it works. And you're welcome to send any questions over that you might have. We'll get those in between Jeannie's slides as we're going through. And if she just cruises right on through because she's so excited, we'll address them at the end. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'd like to hand it over to Jeannie.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks so much. And I am really excited to be with you all today. As Kat mentioned, I am the Director of Learning Strategy at BlueVolt. If you are just encountering BlueVolt for the first time, BlueVolt provides learning solutions that increase sales, differentiate brands, and improve productivity. And so today we're going to be talking about some things that are just near and dear to who we are as an organization, which is really helping companies find ways that they can leverage learning to grow their business. So before we dive in, I want to just give you a little bit of information about my background and who I am so that for those of you listening in later or with us today, you'll know a little bit about who I am, where I've been, and sort of what experiences I've had that have led me to be the one who's here today teaching you about the learning canvas. So I am the Director of Learning Strategy. I've been with BlueVolt for almost 4 years, and I have over 20 years of experience designing, developing, and implementing training programs for lots of Fortune 500 companies, including Wells Fargo and Microsoft and Bridgestone. But I've also worked a lot with small manufacturers, with distributors, all across the country and in all different industries. So one of my favorite things is really looking at everything I've learned about business strategy, from big business all the way down to small local companies here. I live and work in Columbia, South Carolina, and we have a lot of local businesses and manufacturers here. So I like to look at where all the intersections and connections between and among these companies to find that sweet spot between business strategy, return on investment, and evaluation metrics when it comes to leveraging learning within your business. So today what we're going to do is we are going to talk a little bit about how to ask some really great questions that can help you actually create a learning strategy that is going to help you influence others to sell your products. So one of the first parts and pieces of this is to explore a concept called beginner's mind. So this concept, which was taken from Buddhist philosophy, speaks to something we experience often as experts, as I'm sure you're the expert in your product and in your field, which is the inability to remember what it was like before we were experts. So as an instructional designer for many years, my success depended primarily on my ability to bring the subject matter experts that I worked with back to their beginner's mind. And so one of the best tools for doing this was to learn how to ask good questions. Asking questions is something that's always come naturally to me, but over time I've realized that isn't necessarily the case for everyone. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time this morning talking about one of my favorite strategies for coming up with questions when you're faced with a problem that needs solving, or an expert that needs to be reminded of what it was like before, sort of back when they were still learning, because that's really where your learners are going to be when you're creating training and leveraging that training in order to help them sell your products. So this is essential for our conversation today. As I mentioned before, being able to ask good questions will directly impact your ability to achieve success with the Channel Learning Canvas. And so let's dive in and get started. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to the Acrostic Stamper. It's a framework that can help you break down any problem or situation into a set of relevant questions that need to be considered. So what I'm going to do is step you through the Scamper process right now. So the S is for substitute. Is there something that can be substituted for the process, product, or situation you're facing or exploring? The C is for combine. So how can you combine it with something else? The A is for adapt. How can the product, service, or problem or experience be adapted in some way? The M is for modify or magnify. How can you modify or magnify the problem or product in some way? The P is for put. Can you put the object, experience, or situation to some other use? The E is for eliminate. What can you eliminate from the situation? And then the R is for reversing or rearranging. So questions like what happens when you reverse the situation or rearrange the product? So even though all of these may not yield a productive answer every time, you can see how using this Scamper framework can help to bring you to a new mode of thinking and help you develop questions to bring you back to your beginner's mind. So let's take a few minutes now and look at how this Scamper process really shows up when you're doing some problem solving, specifically around learning and developing your learning programs. So what we're going to do is see how Scamper plays out in a real life scenario. So right this moment, if you are following along with us live, or if you're watching this replay later, I want you to think about 1 to 3 of the biggest problems you're dealing with when it comes to channel sales or your learning programs that you have internally. And so if you are following along with us live, you can feel free to pop those into the chat right now. If you're watching the replay, just make a few notes. Because what we're going to do is we're going to actually use this Scamper process to step through a problem that I see lots of organizations and companies facing when it comes to leveraging learning to grow their business. So let's take a look at this question. How do I get the right content in front of my learners to change key behaviors? So I know that some of you on the call today might be learning professionals, and yet I want to remind us that learning is not the ultimate outcome we're looking for by providing training. What we're looking for is a change in some key behavior that will impact the business. So instead of simply looking for something like more content, how can I get more content in front of your learners? Let's focus on applying the Scamper process to help us identify how to get the right content in front of our learners to inspire that key behavior change. In this particular case, you probably like your learners to recommend and sell your products. So now that we're all prepped and ready to go and ask some great questions, let's take a look at what this looks like when we apply the Scamper process. So here's a list of questions that you might ask yourself when you're applying Scamper to this particular situation. So the first one is, what processes can I substitute for my current content curation process that would inspire behavior change? So there's something you can do or substitute to what you're currently doing now. How can I combine sourcing or creating content with some other process? What can I adapt or copy from someone else's content? How can I modify or alter my current process for sourcing some of the game-changing content? What can I magnify or add to the content I'm sharing now? How can I put my content to other uses? Or how can I put other content to use in my learning program? When we look at the E, we can ask, what can I eliminate from the way I'm creating and sourcing content? And then, what's the reverse of more content, or how can I rearrange my content sharing or sourcing? So do you see how just using that Scamper process can open up and really lead you to some questions that you may not have asked before? And some of the questions you come up with along the way are going to be worth diving into. Some of them you may just end up tossing to the side and decide that they're not really relevant to the project or the mission that you're working towards now. But having this process in place is going to help you ask better questions when you're using the Canvas. So I know that we're all here to learn more about how you can leverage the Canvas within your learning solutions. So let's go ahead and dive in. So if your business is like most, you're always looking for the best ways to increase mind share, foster brand loyalty, and sell more products. But with so many considerations when you're evaluating your channel, it can be difficult to know where to start or how to effectively reach your audience. So we at BlueVolt developed the Channel Learning Canvas to help get you thinking about your learning segments and the most effective ways to reach them. It's a framework for evaluating your audience, their needs, and your opportunities to communicate with your channel and drive business goals. So by following along in this next section today, you'll discover how the Channel Learning Canvas can help you analyze your ideal learner, including their motivations and their need for both mastery and micro content. It can also help you identify the content that you want to share, how to curate it, sequence it, and deliver it using resources you already have in place. Finally, the Canvas can help you define the online learning experience that you want learners to have as you begin to capture your ideas for designing a landing page that is both welcoming and engaging. You're also going to consider the different pathways that will lead your learners to your training and figure out what criteria you'll use to evaluate their success as well as your own success. So if that sounds like a good next step for us, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at the Canvas. The Channel Learning Canvas is a tool to help you think about the three most important elements of your business and your training initiative. So first you have your learners, then you have the content that you want to share with your learners, and you have the overall experience that you want to provide. So for every single situation where you are wanting to provide learning to your audience, you want to always consider these three key components. Canvas can also help you organize your ideas for sharing content and envision the experience you want to provide to your learners. Because when you think about it, the two go hand in hand, right? So if you provide a learning experience that isn't intuitive or engaging, your learners might not stick around long enough to ever make it to your content. On the other hand, if your first impression outshines the quality of your content, your learners might leave feeling disappointed. So in either case, they might decide not to return. So that's why the Canvas is laid out the way that it is, to give you the opportunity to think about your content, to think about the learner's experience, and to think about the needs of the learner sort of all in one visual component. So let's take a look first at what's here at the center of the Canvas. Because we all know that at the center of any learning engagement is the learner. So it makes sense to start by thinking about who you want to teach. So depending on what type of a business you are and what type of channels you serve, you're going to want to consider your learners. Are they in management, inside sales, outside sales? You're going to also want to think about what do you want them to know. So how do they want to learn about the different products and services that you have to offer? And finally, what barriers to learning will they need to overcome? The Channel Learning Canvas can help you define your audience. So there's also a space for you to explore options for keeping learners engaged. Do your learners need just-in-time, on-the-job? This is what we call micro-learning engagement, so that they can access on demand. Or do they need more foundational instruction necessary for content mastery? Would they appreciate storytelling, case studies, and scenarios designed to help them envision real-world applications for their new knowledge? Do they crave opportunities to interact with one another, ask questions, and share what they've learned? Are they intrinsically motivated, or will they benefit from some extra incentive, like potentially some rewards or recognition? Basically, you can use the Channel Learning Canvas to capture your best ideas for engaging your learners as you strive to meet their needs and expectations. So this foundational element of understanding your learners is your first key to actually being able to shift that behavior and influence them to sell your products. But it's not the only aspect of the learning that matters, right? Because we still got these two blocks of the content and the experience. So let's step through the 6 blocks that make up content and experience within the Canvas, and I'll give you some tips and some questions to think about as you're sort of looking at each one. So content curation begins with an audit of your current inventory of assets? Videos, sales sheets, slideshow presentations? What marketing and training collateral have you already created that you can utilize in new ways? Use the Channel Learning Canvas to identify existing assets as well as those that need to be created in order to close the performance gaps or give your learners what they need to really feel not only qualified to sell your products, but like they can't wait to sell your products. The next category here is modality. So here we're answering the question of how will you engage your learners? How will you deliver content that can vary? How you deliver content can vary depending on what you're trying to communicate. So hands-on training, instructor-led training, online learning, they each can have a role to play in keeping your learners informed and prepared to apply what they've learned. So the Channel Learning Canvas is designed to help you match the course content to interactive delivery options to maximize learning effectiveness and engagement. This is one of those places where you're going to want to consider, is it a micro-learning opportunity? Do they need this information just in time? Or is it a mastery learning opportunity where they really need to be able to synthesize and analyze this information and have it on the ready? So an example of this might be for micro-learning, you might have some specific part SKUs or part information that could be used by people in your channel sales organization as reference. They only need it in the moment when they're trying to help that customer. However, understanding fundamentally how your product works and how your product meets the needs of your customer segment, that's more of your mastery information that you want your salespeople to have sort of on the ready and ready to share with your customers at any chance they get. So that's just a quick example of the difference there between micro and mastery content. Deciding on a sequence to deliver content can seem overwhelming, especially when you have a lot of information to share and or a diverse audience to share it with. Where are you most prepared to dive in? Where's the greatest need? Which concepts are foundational? And which ones require skills that are more complex? Use the Channel Learning Canvas to sort through your questions around the best ways to build relationships with your learners and keep them coming back for continual engagement. So you really want to ask yourself here in the sequence block, how can you structure content to make it more meaningful and more impactful? So now we've talked a lot about content. You're understanding how to curate your content and find those little bits and pieces of your marketing materials that have already been created that could be part of a learning solution. We've talked about modality, which are all the different ways that you can provide learning to your learners. And then we've also had a chance to look at sequencing. So is there some content that makes more sense to go behind or before other content? But now let's take a look and spend some time on the other side of the canvas where we're going to be focusing in on the learner's experience. The Channel Learning Canvas can help you explore the mindset of your learners' expectations around first impressions. So how do you want to welcome your learners to the learning environment? What can you do to put them at ease and make sure that they can quickly and easily access the information they're looking for? The Channel Learning Canvas can help you identify opportunities to create a learning environment that's inviting and intuitive, where learners feel engaged right from the start. So the way I like to think about this is if you build amazing content and you have this great content available through your university, but your learners either can't find the content, they can't find the course they're looking for, their first impression is a little unorganized, then that may, in fact, set them up not for success when it comes to your content, even though your content's really great. So we want to focus on not only having great learning content, but also what is that experience through which they can reach the learners. So let's move into this next section. We're going to talk a little bit about pathways. A critical element of your strategy should focus on how you'll drive learners to your content. Easy access to information is critical to learner engagement. Will you build awareness through marketing communications? Advertise it on your website? How can you utilize word of mouth sharing among your current brand champions? The more pathways you create to port learning to your channel, the better your chance for success. The Channel Learning Canvas can help you begin to pinpoint them. So these are all the different ways that you want to bring learners into your university. And so identifying those pathways and putting them into place is going to help drive more traffic. The more traffic you get to your university, the more impact you're going to have with the learning that you provide. So now we want to talk a little bit about evaluation. So closing performance gaps or closing sales gaps is an iterative process that requires ongoing refinement over time. Analytics can provide insight into the effectiveness of existing training, and surveys can reveal opportunities to create new content based on learner feedback. So how will you know if your content is having the desired intent? The Channel Learning Canvas can help you get started thinking about how you'll measure success of your curriculum against the evolving needs of your business. So this is one of those places where if you're already tracking training completions and you're already tracking sales data, how can you match those together to really truly be able to see and assume some impact between one and the other? So once you've taken the time to consider each of these elements that make up the canvas, your overall strategy for a channel university will begin to emerge. And as you fill in each section of the canvas, you'll soon be able to identify the next steps you need to take and the opportunities you have to refine the way you communicate with your channel to drive business goals. So I'm sure you're wondering, what now? So we've been talking a lot about shifting behaviors, and we've been talking a lot about focusing on impact and results. And so what I'd love to do is offer an opportunity to any of you who are watching this live or who watch a replay of this, is to really take the time to draft out or look at creating a canvas for one of the following situations. Maybe you have a new product launch that's coming up and you really want to hone in and get a strategy in place for your product training around that launch. Or maybe you have a new product promotion that's coming up for the end of the year, or perhaps you have a new sales channel. Any of these opportunities are really a great opportunity to dive into the canvas and answer some of those questions so that you can dive into your strategy with a clear plan, know that you've covered the content aspects and the experience aspects, and that you've really truly thought about what your learner needs to be able to implement the change that you would like to create for them. And so what we're going to do is we'll send you a link to download your own copy of the Learning Canvas along with a replay of this webinar. So my hope is that you can download your own copy of the Learning Canvas, or maybe you've sketched it out as you're watching on your pad with a sheet of paper and a pen. One of my absolute favorite things is to get an email from someone who watched a webinar about the canvas and then drew out their own canvas and is looking for some feedback or would like to have a conversation about their learning strategy. And so I'm absolutely 100% here and ready to help you and think about this canvas with you if that would be helpful. So what I'd like to do is open it up now to get some of your questions answered. If any of those have come up on the call, I'll pause for a minute and check in with Kat to see if she's been able to track any questions from you guys so that I can get those answered. And if you are watching live and you have a question, remember to just put it in the chat box and we'll be sure and get it answered. So Kat, I'm going to check in with you. Any questions come in?
Thanks, Jeannie. No questions as of yet, but I think we can just give people a few minutes to bring up their questions and I'll shoot them over to you.
Okay, that sounds great. So while we're waiting, I just want to, so there are a couple of questions that seem to come up again and again when we're having this conversation about the Channel Learning Canvas. So I'm just going to dive in and answer a few of those while we're waiting to see what comes in through the webinar. So one of the things that people often ask is, can I create just one learning canvas and have my entire plan mapped out? And so one of the things that I would advise you to do is to map out a Channel Learning Canvas for each learner audience that you have, right? So if you have several different learner audiences within your organization or several different sales channels, sometimes the needs of those different learner audiences can show up in the canvas and significantly impact your strategy. So I would say create one canvas for each of the different audiences and then match them all back up together. So I'm not necessarily saying that you need to do 3 times the work if you have 3 audiences. A lot of the content is the same across the different canvases, but it could be positioned differently or wrapped up in different training tracks. So those are all things that will be highlighted and sort of you'll really have the opportunity to explore them if you do create one canvas per learner audience. And another question that I get a lot is, what if I need to create new content but I don't know how? So one of the things you might want to do is go back and watch a previous webinar that we did last month where we were talking about really 5 different ways that you can think about creating and transforming your existing content into learning content. But one of the things is you probably are already creating so much content and really good content within your organization. So the difference between simply having a marketing asset and having a true piece of training is in the outcome and the result that you want to get from that training. And a lot of times the impact or the difference is simply asking a few additional questions or providing a quick reference sheet along with a video. So there are lots of ways to really leverage the content that you're already creating within your organization as a learning asset in your university. So let's see. The last question here that I want to make sure that I cover before we wrap up is someone thinking about the best ways to create an evaluation strategy for their training efforts. And so I would say what you want to do here is you want to really learn how to walk before you run. So while the best case scenario is to really be able to directly track your training data as it aligns to your sales data, one of the first things you have to do in order to do that, though, is actually be tracking your sales data and tracking your training completions. And so if those 2 things are not something that you're currently doing, I recommend that you start by tracking those 2 different data points and then reach out to us. You know, we can help you figure out for sure how to track your training completions. You can work with your ASA partners as well to figure that out and try to get some insight there. And once you have those 2 things in place, we can absolutely help you with the best ways to bring that data together so that you can really start tracking the success rate of your training work on your sales strategy. So Kat, I'm going to turn it back over to you and see if there are any questions that came in, but also if not, give you a chance to let people know where they can learn more and how they can be in touch.
Thanks, Jeannie. We did have one question. What would be the next step of implementation in terms of having this channel learning canvas be effective for our business? Can you talk a little bit about your strategy of like how to take this to the next level before we close?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I recommend is when you have a chance, download your own copy of the Channel Learning Canvas and spend some time with yourself and some key stakeholders in your organization asking and answering the questions that we've talked about in this webinar. And then once you have a draft in place of sort of, and you've had a chance to think through the content curation, the modality, the sequencing, you've had a chance to think about your learner, and then the experience that you want to provide them by way of like a first impression online, the different pathways and what you have available for evaluation. And then what I would recommend is once you have brainstormed some of that, or if you even want help facilitating some of those conversations within your organization, definitely reach out to us because we are here and we would love to continue having that conversation with you about your strategy.
Thanks, Jeannie. I think that's all that we have in terms of questions. So I just want to thank you, Jeannie, for your time to come on and chat with us about the Channel Learning Canvas. And, BlueVolt is always happy to be hosting these types of webinars for ASA. And I know that we have one coming up in December that we're looking forward to. So you'll see more information about that. In the meantime, if you have any questions about the Channel Learning Canvas, or if you want to talk more about how to create content, or even just want to chat and pick Jeannie's brain, give us a call. Our information is listed on the last slide if you are capturing that now or listening to this on recording later, and we would love to explore how this could help your business. We really are passionate about how learning drives solid business initiatives and increases sales and differentiates your brand. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again in December.
Thank you.